Question number 23 is in the name of Deputy Darragh O'Brien. You have 30 seconds to introduce, Deputy.
Yes, Minister. I'd like to ask you what actions have been taken by the Government, your department and by yourself in relation to the current situation in Syria and specifically Aleppo. If you have formally relayed to the Russian ambassador and the Russian government, as well as Syrian authorities, the Irish people's revulsion to their actions in relation to Aleppo, Syria, but specifically in relation to Aleppo. Maybe if you could update us on the situation, please.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. You have 2 minutes.
I want to be perfectly clear my total condemnation of the bombardment of Aleppo. The attacks by the Assad regime and its allies, including Russia, against eastern Aleppo are clearly disproportionate, and the deliberate targeting of hospitals, of medical personnel, of schools and essential infrastructure, and the widespread civilian casualties may well amount to war crimes. Our concerns have been conveyed in the clearest possible terms to the Russian authorities. Ireland does not recognise the legitimacy of the 2014 Syrian presidential elections and has ceased all diplomatic or political contacts with the Assad regime in Syria. I cannot say this government has provided unprecedented levels of humanitarian assistance to the Syrian people since 2012, providing the sum of €62 million in support. I also spoke with UN Special Envoy de Mistura last week, underlining our continuing and strong support for his efforts to stem the destruction of Syria and her people. On Thursday last, the Taoiseach, along with his colleagues at the European Council, reviewed EU efforts to end the horrific violence in Aleppo and in Syria. The US will continue to be a key actor in efforts to bring about a cessation of hostilities. In the coming days, I will have an opportunity to discuss the situation in Syria with Secretary of State John Kerry, to make Ireland's concerns known to him and to hear about his latest efforts in the context of the appalling violence. I will continue to press for accountability, both to provide the victims with the hope of redress and in the hope that it will deter those involved from even worse atrocities. This has been central to our interventions at the UN, in New York, and at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. We have resettled hundreds of Syrians across Ireland, including in my own hometown, some of them survivors of torture by the Assad regime, and we will accept thousands more. We remain engaged throughout the throughout the European Union in the International Syria Support Group and continue to support efforts to find a political resolution to the conflict in Syria.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy, you have 1 minute now.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. What I would like to know specifically is, have you yet met with the Russian ambassador to convey the views of the Irish people face to face in relation to Russia's role in Syria and specifically in Aleppo? I am acutely aware that there are other actors in that theatre of war, but we have an opportunity to put it directly to the Russian ambassador, and I believe you should do so, and I would hope that you will. I'm sure you will. Could I ask you in that context, will the Irish Government support the Russian Government's bid to be a member of the UN Human Rights Council? And furthermore, what is your view or the Government's view in restricting the veto of permanent members of the UN Security Council, which I believe has actually hamstrung the European or the United Nations so far? So I would like to know your views on that, please.
Thank you. Minister, 1 minute, please.
I have also condemned, as recently as last week in this House, the actions of Russia, with particular reference to their engagement on the UN Security Council. What can Ireland do, I'm asked, in support of ending the conflict? We support the efforts of the UN to renew political negotiations based on the 2012 Geneva Communiqué. I have repeatedly made clear our full support for UN Special Envoy Stefan de Mistura, who I spoke to last week. I urge all parties to take steps to give effect to the most recent Geneva Communiqué and their principles, an immediate end to all violence, the setting up of a transitional governing body with executive powers and control over the Syrian security forces, the implementation of a constitutional reform process which preserves the pluralistic character and nature of Syria. Yes, I have directly relayed these concerns to the Russian ambassador, both through my officials some weeks ago and I've met the Russian ambassador. I directly conveyed my views and the views of the Irish government and the views of the Irish people in relation to what is a human catastrophe unfolding in Syria and indeed in particular in the city of Aleppo.
Thank you, Deputy.
Prior to this meeting, my views were clearly conveyed to the Russian ambassador on 2 occasions by my senior officials at my specific direction, which, as Deputy O'Brien will know, is the normal diplomatic channels and normal diplomatic practice for a foreign minister. Indeed, subsequently, these concerns were conveyed again to the ambassador and a senior official in the Russian foreign ministry, who recently visited Dublin.
Minister. 1 final minute, Deputy.
I am glad that you've conveyed those concerns directly. I think I'm aware of the normal diplomatic protocol, but I think that the situation in Syria, specifically Aleppo, actually meant that you, as our Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, the fact that you would meet with the ambassador directly, face to face, is important, and I welcome the fact that you have done that now. Could I ask you, because that hasn't been answered yet, will the Irish Government support the Russian Government's bid to be a member of the UN Human Rights Council? I did ask this last week also during our debate. I'm asking it again here. I hope to get an answer this afternoon.
Thank you. One final moment.